I'm Jane, and I had just turned 28 when I thought I had met the love of my life, Mike. Everything unfolded so quickly. We were married within a year of our first meeting. Mike, an accountant with a tall frame and a laugh that could brighten any room, complimented my career in digital marketing. I love painting on weekends and have always been a planner. We seemed to balance each other perfectly, or so I thought. The day after our wedding, our living room was a delightful mess, overflowing with wrapped gifts and cards, a beautiful chaos that reflected our celebration. Just then, Mike's parents, Carol and Dave, unexpectedly dropped by. I hadn't had much chance to get to know them since our wedding had come together so fast, but they appeared perfectly normal. As we began to open gifts, I noticed Carol and Dave were more than a little curious about what we were unwrapping. "Is that a crystal vase?" Carol asked, picking up a shimmering piece that my Aunt Linda had given us. She turned it over in her hands, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Yeah, it's from my Aunt Linda. Pretty, isn't it?" I replied, hoping to steer her attention away from claiming it. But before I knew it, Carol had set the vase aside in a separate pile. "I think we can find a good place for this at our house," she said casually. Mike, engrossed in untangling a set of fancy kitchen gadgets from his cousin, didn't seem to notice. I shot him a pleading look, hoping he would intervene. "Mom, that's our wedding gift," Mike finally said with an easy smile, as if it were all a big joke. "Oh, come on, it'll just gather dust here. We'll use it," Dave chimed in, wrapping an arm around Carol. "Besides, you two are young, you'll get plenty more gifts over the years." I tried to laugh along, but it felt off. "Actually, I think it would look great in our foyer," I said, attempting to reclaim it without making a scene. Carol glanced at me, her expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Jane, you need to learn to share. We're family now, and families help each other out," she said firmly, as if imparting some kind of lesson. Catching the rising tension, Mike quickly jumped in. "Let's not worry about this now. We've got plenty of gifts, right, Jane?" I nodded, biting back my frustration. Yet as they continued to sift through the gifts, setting aside a few choice items for themselves, that uncomfortable feeling settled deeper in my stomach. It felt like I was watching strangers claim pieces of my life as their own, and Mike simply let it happen. Our first year of marriage flew by, and before I knew it, our anniversary had arrived. I wanted to make it special, a true celebration of us. So I booked a table at Chez Louis, a cozy little spot we both loved. I thought it would be romantic to invite Mike's parents to join us, wanting to show them they were important to us. When we arrived at the restaurant, Carol and Dave were already seated, menus in hand. "This place is fancy," Carol remarked, eyeing the chandeliers above. Mike squeezed my hand under the table, a silent thank you for organizing the evening. As the waiter approached, I ordered salmon, Mike's favorite, and noticed Carol's eyes scanning the menu for the most expensive items. "We'll have the lobster in the filet mignon," she declared, pointing at the priciest options without a second thought. "Why not throw in a bottle of your best wine?" Dave added, winking at the waiter. I felt my smile stiffen. "Quite the celebration, huh?" I tried to keep my tone light. "It's a special night," Mike said with a shrug. "Let's not think about the cost." While the conversation was generally light-hearted, I couldn't shake the feeling that Carol and Dave were indulging like it was their last meal, almost oblivious to the hefty bill that would soon arrive. As we ate, I was consumed by a sense of being taken advantage of. It wasn't about the money, not really, it was the principle. This was our anniversary, and it felt as if it was being hijacked. When the check finally came, I braced myself for the awkward moment ahead. I noticed Mike's eyes widen for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure and handed his card to the waiter. As we left the restaurant, Carol linked her arm through mine. "You know, Jane, this was lovely. We should do it again next year," she said, a satisfied smile on her face. With Thanksgiving approaching, the holiday season was just around the corner. Mike and I had started decorating our home, blending warm fall colors with early Christmas cheer. It felt cozy, like a place you'd want to return to after a long day. One evening, while we were stringing lights around the living room windows, Mike's phone pinged with a message. He read it and chuckled. "Oh, my parents are ahead of the game. They've already sent their Christmas wish list." I paused, untangling a set of lights, and looked up. "A wish list?" "Yeah, they send one every year. It helps with shopping," he explained, scrolling through his phone. Curiosity got the best of me. "So, what's on this famous list?" Mike hesitated for a moment before handing me his phone. The list was extensive: top-tier electronics, designer clothes, luxury items that seemed completely unnecessary. I scrolled through in disbelief. "They can't be serious," I exclaimed. "This is a lot." Taking back his phone, Mike shrugged. "They like the good stuff. What can I say?" I was at a loss for words. A knot formed in the pit of my stomach. Mike's birthday was also approaching, and I had been eagerly planning to gift him the watch he had been eyeing for months. Now, it felt as if any gift I gave would be overshadowed by this extravagant list. When it came to making our own lists, I couldn't shake the feeling of pettiness. "Maybe we should just ask for charitable donations in our name," I suggested half-heartedly. Mike laughed. "Good one. But seriously, what do you want? You need a new laptop, right?" As the holidays rolled around, I bought Carol and Dave a nice coffee maker. Not too fancy, but practical. In return, they gave me a set of scented candles. They were lovely, but the contrast was stark. I didn't say anything. Mike seemed pleased with the expensive drone they gifted him, but the unspoken rule was clear. We were expected to give lavishly and receive modestly. It didn't feel right, but I held my tongue, wrapping gifts and plastering a smile on my face for the holidays. Inside, though, I began to tally the costs, not just in dollars, but in the emotional toll it was taking on me. One day, while staring at my computer screen at work, an email notification popped up. It was my quarterly bonus, bigger than I had anticipated. My first thought was to do something meaningful with it, something for Mike and me. So, I booked us a trip to Paris. We had talked about going since we met, and it felt like the perfect moment to make that dream a reality. That night, as we sat down for dinner, I couldn't wait to share the news. I excitedly told Mike about the surprise trip, and his face lit up in a way I had never seen before. "Paris? Really, babe? That's amazing," he exclaimed, jumping up to kiss me. I was basking in the joy of the moment when his phone rang. It was his mom. I could see the change in his expression immediately. "Yeah, she booked us a trip to Paris," he said into the phone, and I instantly regretted not asking him to keep it quiet for a little while longer. As he listened, his enthusiasm slowly waned. I know, you've always wanted to go." He trailed off, looking at me with a pained expression. My heart sank. After hanging up, a heavy silence enveloped us. "They want to come with us," he said finally, almost as if seeking my approval. I froze, my fork hovering midair. "To Paris with us?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, they said they've never been and have always wanted to go," Mike explained, running a hand through his hair. "I think we should take them." Suddenly, the room felt too small. "It's supposed to be for us, Mike, our trip," I said, feeling the tightness in my chest. He didn't respond right away. "I know, but they're getting older, and I feel bad. They've done so much for me." I thought about all the one-sided gift exchanges, the anniversary dinners, and every little thing that had accumulated over the past year. "But this is our time," I insisted, my voice firm. "We can plan a trip with them another time. This bonus is for us." Mike let out a deep, frustrated sigh. "They won't understand that. You know how they are. And you know how hard I've worked for this." I spoke the words like stones lodged in my throat. "I want us to enjoy it together, just us, like we planned." After a moment of silence, he finally relented. "Okay, we'll tell them some other time might work better." But when the moment came to break the news, Mike hesitated. "Look, maybe we can all go together next year," he suggested, but Carol was having none of it. "Why next year? We can afford it now," she retorted over the speakerphone, her voice tinged with disappointment. I could no longer hold back my frustration. "Because this trip is for us, Carol. Mike and I need this time together," I said, my voice rising. There was a pause before she replied, "Well, that's very selfish of you, Jane. Very selfish indeed." After the call, the air between Mike and me was thick with tension. I could tell he was torn, but I was resolute. Paris was meant to be a dream trip for just the two of us, and I wouldn't let that dream slip away. In the following days, Mike became a shadow in his own home, leaving early for work and returning late. Our conversations dwindled to monosyllables. Dinner's in the oven, I would call out when I heard the garage door open, my voice echoing off the empty walls. "Thanks," he'd reply, the word hanging between us like a ghost. I missed him, missed us. I longed for the easy days when we would drink together on the couch, our plans and laughter intertwined. I yearned to reach out to him, to break through the invisible barrier that had formed after our argument about Paris. But every attempt felt like trying to speak through thick glass. I could see him, but I couldn't connect. One particularly difficult evening, I found myself sitting across from Mike at the dinner table. the sound of his fork scraping against the plate cutting through the heavy silence. I cleared my throat. Mike, this can't go on, I began, my voice barely above a whisper, fearful of shattering the fragile peace between us. We need to talk about what happened. We can't let this silence become our new normal. Mike continued eating, his expression unreadable, until he finally set down his fork. It was a sign I had his attention, even if just for a moment. What do you want me to say, Jane? He asked, a hint of wariness seeping through his words. I want to understand why you're taking this so hard. It feels like you're choosing them over me, I replied, hurt evident in my tone. He sighed, folding his hands in front of him. They're my parents, Jane. They've always dreamed of going to Paris. And what about our dreams? I pressed, frustration bubbling up inside me. What about our plans? Mike ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of exasperation that had become all too familiar. I know, he said, and for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of the man I married, conflicted and torn, but not indifferent. It's just, they've always been there for me. I feel obligated. But where does that leave us, Mike? I leaned forward, desperate to catch his eye. What about our marriage? He hesitated, and in that pause, fear washed over me. What if we weren't as solid as I had believed? What if the foundation we built was more like sand, easily eroded by the tide of his parents' needs? It's supposed to be us against the world, Mike, not me against you and them, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotions swelling inside me. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see the conflict warring within him. I know, Jane. I just don't know how to make everyone happy. And then it hit me with sudden clarity. That's just it. We can't always make everyone happy, but we made vows to each other, Mike. Doesn't that count for something? He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the table before finally meeting mine. It does. It counts for a lot. The rest of the meal passed in contemplative silence, a welcome change from the strained quiet that had become our norm. It felt as if my words had planted a seed, or perhaps nurtured one that had been dormant within Mike all along. As the morning sun poured in through the windows, I noticed that the warmth it usually brought seemed to have no place in our home today. I woke up to an eerie stillness. The other side of the bed lay untouched from the night before, and the emptiness of the house felt like a heavy blanket, suffocating in its silence. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I reached for my phone, expecting the usual void of messages that had taken residence in our home. Instead, my screen lit up with a flood of notifications, each one from my bank. A lump formed in my throat as I scanned the details. Multiple transactions, including airline tickets and hotel bookings in Paris, all made while I was asleep. The timestamps on the emails revealed that the flight had left hours ago. Mike and his parents were already on their way to Paris, using my hard-earned bonus to fund a trip I was meant to be on. Disbelief morphed into anger, and then a crushing sense of betrayal settled in. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, as the reality sank in. Mike had access to my account. I had trusted him implicitly, never imagining he would betray that trust. Yet here it was, stark in black and white, a digital paper trail of deceit. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The one person I had believed would stand by me had chosen his own comfort over a relationship. Memories flooded back, reminding me of all the little signs I had brushed aside, all the excuses I had made for him and for us. With trembling fingers, I dialed his number, fully aware he wouldn't answer, not with the time difference and not with my previous ultimatum ringing in his ears. Mike, I began, only to be met by the cheerful beep of his voicemail, which felt almost mocking. I saw the charges. You took your parents to Paris with my bonus. I don't even know what to say, but I hope it's worth it. I hope it's worth everything. The house felt even emptier after the call, the walls closing in on me under the weight of everything left unsaid, and now perhaps never to be spoken. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos raging within me. They had left just like that, with no regard for me or the life we were supposed to be building together. I canceled the hotel rooms and the return flights, severing every piece of the trip tied to my finances. With each cancellation, I felt fragments of my old life slipping away, the future I had envisioned evaporating before my eyes. By the time I finished, there was nothing left to do but act. I contacted the bank and revoked Mike's access to my accounts, feeling the terrifying yet liberating finality with each click. The man I had married, the family I had tried to be a part of, they were all strangers now. Strangers who had used me, seeing my generosity as something to exploit rather than cherish. I packed my bags with a robotic efficiency, each item a reminder of a dream I had to put away. There was no going back from this. No gentle words or apologies could mend the rift his betrayal had caused. Mike had chosen his path, and in doing so, he had set me on mine. The ring I had once worn with pride lay cold and heavy in my palm. I set it down on the counter, its sparkle mocking me in the morning light. With one last look at the life I was leaving behind, I closed the door on the house that had never truly felt like home. It was late afternoon when I finally drove away, my car packed with clothes and essentials, a stark reminder of the sudden turn my life had taken. As I hit the road, messages began to flood in, one from Mike, several from his mother. I pulled over to read the messages, knowing they would only fuel my resolve. Mike's message flashed on the screen. "Jane, please, we need to talk about this. Can't we just discuss it?" The simplicity of his words felt almost insulting. I started to type a response but stopped, realizing that no words could bridge the chasm between us. His mother's messages were a confusing mix of anger and concern. "What's going on? Why have you canceled our rooms? Call me." I could picture her sitting in a Paris cafe, expecting luxury but facing complications. Frustrated, I turned my phone off. They were in the middle of a trip funded by deceit. They could figure it out. My first stop was the bank. I needed to ensure my finances were completely secure. The bank manager, a middle-aged woman with a gentle demeanor, greeted me. "I need to make sure all my accounts are locked down. My husband won't have access anymore," I explained, my voice steady despite the emotions churning within me. "Of course," she nodded, offering a sympathetic smile. "Let's make sure you're protected." By the time I left the bank, my accounts were secure, and a new sense of determination settled within me. I drove to my sister's house, the only place I felt safe. She opened the door before I could even knock. "Jane, I've been so worried," she said, pulling me into a hug. I allowed myself a moment to be held, letting the weight of my reality be shared. "I can't believe he would do this to you," she said as we sat down at her kitchen table. "You deserve so much better." I nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. "I do, and that's why I'm not going back. I've canceled everything. I've left the house. I'm done." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Good for you. What's your plan now?" I looked around the familiar room, feeling the first twinges of relief. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm starting with a divorce. I can't stay married to someone who has so little respect for me." Her face was a mix of anger and pride. "I'll support you however I can. Do you need a lawyer?" "I'll find one," I said, my voice growing firmer with each word. "Need someone who doesn't know Mike or his family. I need this cut clean." The conversation shifted as Sarah helped me unpack my card and plan the next few days. There was a strange comfort in the mundane tasks, a grounding in the midst of chaos. I was standing in her kitchen, a mug of coffee warming my hands, when my phone vibrated persistently. It was Mike again. "Jane, we need to talk. I'm sorry. I miss you, and I think we can work things out." His text was a blend of apology and plea. I sighed, feeling the same rehearse "I'm sorry" becoming a threadbare blanket that offered no comfort. "Not this time, Mike," I muttered under my breath, typing a response that left no room for ambiguity. "There's nothing left to discuss. Please respect my decision." I could almost hear his desperation in the silence that followed, but it wasn't enough to make me reconsider, not anymore. My resolve was tested further a few days later when Mike's parents made a dramatic appearance at my sister's doorstep. Their faces twisted in anger as they barged past Sarah, who stood wide-eyed at the door. "You've got some nerve, Jane," his mother exclaimed, her voice shrill. "You ruined our family vacation. You're just a greedy, selfish woman." Sarah stepped in front of me, protective. "That's enough. You're not going to come into my house and insult my sister." The argument escalated, drawing the attention of neighbors peeking out from their windows. I was sure someone would call the police. It ended with Sarah threatening to do just that if they didn't leave. The departure left a sour air that lingered long after they were gone. But amidst the chaos, a realization settled within me. I was truly done. The divorce process felt like a cold legal ballet, and I danced my part, signing papers and nodding through explanations of settlements and divisions. Yet with each stroke of the pen, I felt chains breaking and tethers loosening. And then it was over. I stood outside the courthouse, a free woman. The air was crisp, a gentle wind playing with the loose strands of my hair. Sarah, be tight, her support unwavering. You did it, Jane, she whispered, pride evident in her voice. I had stood up to the selfishness that tried to claim me, resisting the manipulation that sought to bind me. I turned away from the courthouse, away from a past that no longer held me. The messages from Mike continued for a while, a mix of apologies, bargaining, and eventually anger. But they went unread, floating in the digital void as I moved forward with my life. The apartment I rented was small, but filled with sunlight. I decorated it with plants, books, and new memories. I went back to school, enrolling in classes that fueled a passion for learning I had neglected for too long. One quiet evening, as I sat on my little balcony with a cup of tea in hand, I deleted Mike's number from my phone. I was free to heal, free to grow, and most importantly, free to be unapologetically me.